sincero, de donde crece la palma. Yo soy un hombre sincero. No tengo referencia. Y antes de hoy me quiero echar mis versos del alma. Guantanamera, como dice mi son, Guajira Guantanamera, somos tú no la ves. Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Yo vengo de todas partes y hacia todas partes voy. Yo vengo de todas partes y hacia todas partes voy. Parte soy entre la sangre, en los montes, montes soy. Guantanamera, como dice el sol, Guajira Guantanamera, le cantan los cubanos. Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera. Mira cómo yo te canto. Yo sé de un pesar profundo entre las penas y nombres, la esclavitud de los hombres es la gran pena del mundo. Por eso yo quiero mi Cuba libre. Guantanamera, mismo, como dice Cuban. Guantanamera, cabe los renos, que vive Venezuela. Guantanamera, sí, Guantanamera, eso, Guantanamera. Muchas gracias. Gracias Ariel.
Gracias.
Bueno, la verdad es que Guajira Guantanamera tiene leopardo un abrigo en su monte seco y pardo. Yo tengo más que el leopardo, porque tengo un buen amigo.
La caída de Martí causó gran impacto entre los cubanos residentes en Tampa. Escuchemos a Emiliano Salcides Jr. The fall of José Martí caused a great impact among the Cubans living in Tampa. Let's listen to Mr. Emiliano Salcides Jr.
Muy buenas tardes, señoras y señores. Aquí se han dicho muchas verdades, pero lo más importante que quiero que recuerden, no se vayan esta noche sin sacarse un retrato enfrente de lo que fue el Liceo Cubano, la primer fábrica de Tampa-Ybor, que cuando resultó tan pequeña, la hicieron el Liceo Cubano, el lugar de recreo, el lugar donde todos se reunían. Y cuando digo todos, particularmente los cubanos. Hicieron un censo en 1890. ¿Qué población tenía Ybor City en 1890? Tenía más de 2.600 cubanos. Tenía 250 españoles y tenía 57 italianos. Así que la colonia que aquí dominaba era la colonia cubana. Y esto era el Capitolio cubano aquí en Ybor. No dejen de sacarse una foto frente a lo que fue el Liceo Cubano, que ahora está documentado hasta en un sello que ha emitido Cuba. Aquí han hablado de José Martí, han hablado de Vicente Martínez Ybor, han hablado de Fernando Figueredo Socarrás. Yo quiero reconocer que este sitio es un sitio histórico. Y para que mejor me comprendan los que aquí han acudido a este acto, les voy a hablar en inglés para que todos puedan comprender. You are in a very historic location. You are standing on history of Tampa, and particularly Ybor City, and particularly Cuban history. It was in this corner that cigar factory was built. It was too small. Martínez Ybor gave instructions, build me a large cigar factory. And we all know the huge cigar factory, especially the staircase where Jose Martí is photographed here in Tampa. Who was here? Who was directing the operation? Of course, the old man, Vicente Martínez Ybor, and his young protege. I say young protege because Ignacio Aya was much younger than Vicente Martínez Ybor. But Martínez Ybor liked this young Spaniard so much that even though he was a competitor, he would guide Ignacio Aya. And both of them decided to come to a new area here in Tampa Bay. And together they bought land and each established their own cigar factories and houses for their cigar workers. We all know that the first cigar that was made here in Ybor City was made on April the 13th, 1886. It was not Vicente Martínez Ybor that has the distinction of factory number 1. That was Ignacio Aya. But Vicente Martínez Ybor shortly thereafter started producing in this corner, which was his factory, until they completed the brick factory. It was at that moment, early in 1887, that he gave his small factory to his workers, primarily Cuban workers, and they started their club, their recreation center, and they called it, like in Cuba, El Liceo Cubano, the Cuban Lyceum. It's a very old name that came from the Latin, and from the Latin it had been adopted from the Greek. It really means a place of learning, where the audience can hear lectures, can hear debates, can hear conferences, recitals, and musical concerts. That, of course, would take place on the second floor. The second floor is where Jose Martí gave his famous speeches, the two most famous speeches that he gave here in this corner on the second floor. That's where they would have reunions. That's where they would have meetings. On the first floor there was, of course, a barber shop. And of course there was a bar. and Manuel Garcia was the most popular bartender right here in el Liceo Cubano. The Martinez-Ybor factory was transferred from this corner to that huge brick building, and this continued to develop. And it was later in 1887, as documented by Dr. Kenya Dworkin, who is here from Carnegie Mellon University, and where she has documented that the very first theatrical performance in Ybor City history took place right here on the second floor with the presentation Amor de Madre, for love of mother. So the building not only was a place where they could meet and have a drink and network, but this was also a cultural center. This became a very important location because every time that Martí would come, he would have meetings here in this building, meeting with different groups, uniting them in the cause of Cuban freedom. Right here in this corner, they created a landmark that history has documented. It was a community building. It was the center of social activity. As the old cigar factory deteriorated, the Liceo Cubano had to move. And they moved 4 blocks from here, almost at the corner of 17th on 7th Avenue, in a beautiful wood frame building, 2-story, that had been built by a Cuban society called Los Caballeros de la Luz. Caballeros de la Luz, in honor of the famous Cuban teacher and philosopher, José de la Luz y Caballero. But this building carries the name Socarraz. And I'm very proud of Fernando Figueredo Socarraz. And I want to share with you why it's so important to Tampa history and Cuban history. Who was Fernando Figueredo Socarraz? He was a sharp student, raised in Bayamo, born in Camagüey. He was such a good student that they sent him to Havana for high school. He did so well in high school that they sent him to the state of New York, and there he was studying engineering. He studied in Troy, New York, which is where we now call Van Rensselaer Technological University. He became a member of the Masonic temple in New York called La Universal. And as he was finishing his studies, he received word that the revolution for independence was starting there in Cuba, and that his uncle, Perucho Figueredo, had written the Cuban national anthem. Every Cuban knows the words of their national anthem, written by the uncle of the man for whom this building is named. Fernando Figueredo arrived in Oriente Province and quickly became a member of the Chief of Staff to none other than Carlos Manuel de Céspedes, who was the president in arms. Of course, he spoke English very well. He had engineering training. He was a smart student. So he became quickly a luminary there in the fight for independence. But they didn't win independence. A truce occurred, and Fernando Figueredo Socarrás, together with others, protested the truce because they wanted independence for their country. Because of that, he had to go into exile in Dominican Republic, and from Dominican Republic moved to Key West. In Key West, this guy is so sharp. This guy is such a natural born leader. He gets elected to the House of Representatives. He becomes the first Hispanic in the Florida House of Representatives. He returns to Key West and is appointed Superintendent of Public Instructions. Jose Marti arrives in Key West and he meets with Fernando Figueredo, Socarraz, and others, and they get to know each other. And as Ariel has told you, Fernando Figueredo Socarraz becomes one of Marti's closest friends and advisors. West Tampa is quickly growing, and there is talk that the Florida legislature is going to create a new city just on the other side of the river. And on May the 18th, 1895, the Florida legislature creates the city of West Tampa. Immediately the friends told Fernando Figueredo Socarraz, "Tú debes de correr para alcalde. You need to run for mayor of West Tampa." Little did they know that the very next day, a day like today, 126 years ago today, Jose Marti was just finishing lunch with Bartolomé Massó, as well as with the Generalissimo Máximo Gómez, when they heard shots coming in the battlefield. They quickly mounted. Jose Marti had been given a white horse. Jose Marti always dressed in a dark suit. Imagine a dark navy blue or black suit on a white horse in a battlefield. He was quickly a target. He was shot 3 times and killed. He probably died before his body hit the ground. That was the 19th of May, 1895, a day like today. It was a Sunday. The Spaniards quickly recovered the body. The Cuban Mambis were never able to recover the body, and the body was taken to Santiago de Cuba and buried in the cemetery Santa Efigenia. There was rumors, there were suspicions, there was gossip that Jose Marti had died. But the Cubans were saying, esas son mentiras de los españoles. Jose Marti no puede estar muerto. And after a few days, in fact, almost 3 full weeks, there were no cell phones. There was no computers. There was no immediate telephone to call and say, es verdad, Jose Marti murió. It took almost 3 weeks for the official word to get to Tampa from El Partido Revolucionario Cubano in New York. When Fernando Figueredo read the official reports that Marti in fact was dead, he made an announcement, and all of Ybor City and all of West Tampa went into mourning. Many Cuban flags at half-staff, many balconies with black ribbon, because everybody was mourning this great man. So today, we not only remember Jose Marti, but we remember in this building a great hero, a luminary by the name of Fernando Figueredo Socarrás. Not only did he get elected mayor of West Tampa, he became the superintendent of public schools in West Tampa. And just when the American military forces were going to be leaving Cuba, he and his family returned to Cuba. In Cuba, he became the treasurer of the Republic of Cuba. One other fact that many people don't know, but Gabriel Cartaya has documented it so well in his recently published book, Martí in Tampa. It was Fernando Figueredo, Socarraz, that as Martí's mother, Martí's sister, Leonor, and Martí's nephew arrived in Tampa, it was Fernando Figueredo Socarraz that took them under his wing and provided a home on Chestnut Street in West Tampa. So not only had Martí come here more than 20 times, but his mother lived here for a few months with her daughter and a nephew who volunteered to become a Mambi soldier for Cuban independence. And another grandson of Leonor Martí also volunteered. And in fact, Jose Martí's son, Pepito, volunteered in the Revolutionary Army. I've given you a brief report on Fernando Figueredo Socarraz. I compliment Mr. Shaw. I compliment Ariel Quintela and their partners for keeping alive the history, the rich history that we have here in Tampa, particularly in Ybor City. When word got to New York that Jose Martí had died, his boss, the publisher and editor of the New York Sun, equivalent to today's New York Times, that was none other than Charles Dana. And I'm going to quote to you the beautiful words that he said about Martí. We learn with poignant sorrow of the death in battle of Jose Martí, well-known leader of the Cuban revolutionists. We knew him long and well and esteemed him profoundly. For a protracted period beginning 20-odd years ago, Martí was employed as a contributor to this newspaper, The Sun, writing on subjects and questions of fine art. In these things, his learning was solid and extensive, and his ideas and conclusions were original and brilliant. He was a man of genius, a man of imagination, of hope and of courage, one of those descendants of the Spaniard race whose American birth and instinct seem to have added to the revolutionary tincture which all modern Spaniards inherit. His heart was warm and affectionate, his opinions ardent and aspiring, and he died as such a man might wish to die, battling for liberty and democracy. Of such heroes, there are not too many in the world, and his warlike grave testifies that even in a positive and material age, there are spirits that can give all for their principles without thinking of any selfish return for themselves. Better words could not have been spoken about Jose Martí. Again, I applaud the naming of this building for one of the great heroes of Tampa history, especially being from West Tampa, our first mayor, Fernando Figueredo Socarrás. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias al señor Salcines. Thank you, Mr. Salcines. La doctora Kenia